The smell of rust and burnt metal filled the air as Captain Rodriguez walked through the massive cargo bay of Kepler Station. Behind him, his small team of engineers and mechanics followed, their faces showing a mix of curiosity and disappointment. They had been waiting for this moment for months, the day humanity would receive its first real chance to join the galactic community as an independent spacefaring civilization. What they found instead was a floating junkyard. "This is it, Lieutenant?" Park whispered, staring at the collection of twisted metal, broken machinery, and what looked like spare parts from a dozen different alien races. "This is what the Galactic Council considers a generous donation to help us build our first fleet." Rodriguez said nothing. He had learned long ago that sometimes silence was better than letting his real thoughts slip out. The council representatives, tall, elegant beings from 3 different star systems, stood nearby, their translators buzzing with what sounded suspiciously like laughter. They weren't even trying to hide their amusement. "Humans always so eager, yes?" one of them said, his blue-scaled face twisted into what might have been a smile. "Take old things, make them work, very creative people, humans." The word creative came out like an insult. Rodriguez walked deeper into the pile of discarded technology. Every piece told a story of failure or obsolescence. There were hull plates from Xanthari warships that had been retired 50 years ago, power cores from the hegemony that had been replaced by newer, more efficient models, weapon systems that looked like they belonged in a museum rather than a working spacecraft. "Sir," Chief Engineer Blake called out from behind a stack of what looked like broken antenna arrays. "You need to see this." Rodriguez made his way over, stepping carefully around loose cables and sharp metal edges. Blake was kneeling next to a massive cylindrical object, his hands running over strange symbols carved into its surface. "This is a Corthic energy distributor," Blake said, his voice filled with excitement that seemed completely out of place given their situation. "I've only seen pictures of these in technical manuals. They stopped making them because they were too hard to control. So it's useless," Park said flatly. "Maybe to them," Blake replied, standing up and wiping his hands on his uniform. "But look at this." He led them to another section of the pile, where twisted pieces of what looked like golden mesh were scattered among broken computer components. "Zephyrian neural networks," he explained. "They threw these away because they couldn't make them work with their newer AI systems. The programming languages were incompatible." Rodriguez was starting to see a pattern, but he wasn't sure he liked where it was heading. "What are you thinking, Blake?" "I'm thinking that every major civilization in the galaxy has spent thousands of years perfecting their technology along very specific paths," Blake said, his eyes getting that look they always got when he was working through a complex problem. "They each develop solutions that work perfectly for them. But when something doesn't fit their way of doing things, they just throw it away. Because it doesn't work," Park pointed out. "Because it doesn't work with their other systems," Blake corrected. "But what if someone came along who didn't have any systems yet? Someone who could start fresh and make different choices about how things should fit together?" The council representatives had moved closer, obviously listening to the conversation. Their translators were working overtime, and Rodriguez could see confusion on their faces. The concept Blake was describing seemed to be difficult for them to understand. "Humans cannot make compatibility between incompatible systems," one of them said, his voice carrying the kind of patience usually reserved for small children. "This is not how engineering works. Each technology requires specific support systems, specific power requirements, specific operational parameters. You cannot simply ... mix them together." Blake turned to face the alien delegation, and Rodriguez recognized the stubborn expression that had gotten his chief engineer in trouble more than once during their years working together. "With respect, sir," Blake said, "has anyone actually tried?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. The council representatives exchanged looks that needed no translation. They thought the humans were being ridiculous. "Of course many have tried," another representative said, this one from a race with silver skin and too many fingers. "Waste of resources. Waste of time." Technologies develop along evolutionary paths for good reasons, cannot force incompatible evolution together. But humans didn't evolve with any of these technologies, Blake pressed on. We don't have evolutionary paths that lock us into specific ways of thinking about how things should work. We're starting from scratch. Rodriguez found himself getting caught up in Blake's enthusiasm despite his better judgment. Around the cargo bay, his team was spreading out, examining different pieces of the donated equipment with new eyes. Instead of looking at each item as a broken piece of alien technology, they were starting to see them as ... possibilities. "Sir," called out Specialist Chun from across the bay, "these Vorthan targeting computers, they're not broken. They're just calibrated for Vorthan weapons. But the underlying processing power is incredible. And these hegemony shield generators," added Mechanic Thompson, "they're obsolete because they draw too much power for modern hegemony ships." "But what if you had a different kind of power source?" Rodriguez watched as his team began to see connections that apparently no one else in the galaxy had ever considered. The council representatives looked increasingly uncomfortable as the humans moved through the pile of junk with growing excitement. "This is impossible," the blue-scaled representative said firmly. "Centuries of engineering development cannot be ignored. Laws of physics cannot be circumvented by enthusiasm." "You're absolutely right," Rodriguez said, surprising everyone, including himself. "The laws of physics can't be circumvented, but maybe they can be approached differently." He walked over to where Blake was examining a collection of small, crystalline objects that pulsed with faint internal light. "What are these?" Rodriguez asked. "Resonance crystals from the Eternal Empire," Blake replied. "They use them to synchronize their fleet communications across vast distances. But they're considered obsolete because they interfere with modern sensor arrays." "What kind of interference?" "They create harmonic frequencies that cascade through any connected systems," Blake explained. "The Empire's engineers spent decades trying to eliminate the effect before they finally gave up and developed quantum communication instead." Rodriguez looked at the crystals, then back at the pile of discarded technology surrounding them. "What if the interference isn't a bug? What if it's a feature?" The question seemed to electrify his team. Suddenly, conversations were breaking out all around the cargo bay as engineers and mechanics began to see the donated equipment not as individual broken pieces, but as components in a puzzle that no one had ever tried to solve. "If you could use the resonance effect to create connections between different systems," Chun said thoughtfully, "you might be able to make them work together in ways their original designers never intended." "The harmonic frequencies could act like a universal translator for different technologies," Thompson added. "Not changing what they do, but helping them communicate with each other." The council representatives were no longer laughing. They were watching the humans with expressions that Rodriguez couldn't quite read, but that definitely included concern. "This conversation is pointless," the silver-skinned representative said, his voice sharper than before. "Even if theoretical compatibility could be achieved, practical implementation would require years of development, massive resources, and expertise that humans simply do not possess." "Maybe," Rodriguez said quietly, "but we've got something else." "What?" the representative demanded. Rodriguez looked around at his team, at the pile of discarded dreams and abandoned innovations, at the representatives of civilizations that had achieved wonders beyond human imagination but had somehow lost the ability to see potential in failure. "We've got nothing to lose," he said, "and everything to prove." 3 months later, the construction bay of Kepler Station had been transformed into something that defied every engineering manual in the galaxy. What had once been an organized, sterile workspace now looked like the result of a controlled explosion. In a technology museum, cables snaked across the floor in patterns that made visiting engineers dizzy. Alien components hummed and sparked in combinations that should have been impossible. Chief Engineer Blake stood in the center of it all, his hair sticking up at odd angles and his uniform stained with lubricants from a dozen different worlds. He hadn't slept properly in weeks, surviving on coffee and the kind of stubborn determination that had gotten humanity into space in the first place. "The resonance frequency is still fluctuating," called out Specialist Chun from somewhere deep, inside what was starting to look like a spaceship. "Every time we connect another hegemony power relay, the Zephyrian neural network starts singing." "Singing?" Blake asked, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better days. "Not literally," Chen's voice echoed from inside the hull. "But they're producing harmonic patterns that sound almost musical. It's like they're trying to communicate with each other." Blake grinned. 3 months ago, that kind of statement would have had him calling for medical support. Now, it was just another Tuesday in humanity's first attempt at building something that had never existed before. "Let them sing," he called back. "Maybe they know something we don't." Across the bay, Captain Rodriguez was having what had become a daily argument with Director Walsh from Earth's Colonial Development Authority. Walsh had arrived on the morning transport looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the galaxy. "The Budget Committee is asking serious questions." "Rodriguez," Walsh said, consulting his tablet with the expression of a man reading his own obituation, "we spend more on this project in 3 months than most colonies spend in 5 years. And what do we have to show for it? A pile of junk that occasionally glows in the dark." "We have the foundation of something revolutionary," Rodriguez replied, though he had to admit that from the outside, their progress didn't look like much. "Blake's team has achieved integration between 7 different technological bases. Number 1 in galactic history has ever done that." "Integration that produces what?" Walsh demanded. "Reports that talk about harmonic cascades and emergent system behaviors that no one understands. The council representatives are filing formal complaints about the noise levels. Apparently, whatever you're building is interfering with their equipment 3 decks away." Rodriguez was about to respond when a sound like a giant tuning fork being struck echoed through the bay. Every piece of equipment stopped humming for exactly 3 seconds, then resumed with a different harmonic pattern. The new sound was somehow more organized, more purposeful. "What was that?" Walsh asked, his face going pale. "Progress," Rodriguez said quietly, deep inside the ship's emerging structure. Mechanic Thompson was discovering that human intuition could sometimes solve problems that computers couldn't even understand. He was connecting a Korthik power distributor to a Vorthan targeting system using interface cables that Blake's team had jury-rigged from 6 different sources. "This shouldn't work," he muttered to himself, following a wiring diagram that looked like it had been drawn by someone having a fever dream. "The voltage requirements are completely different. The signal protocols don't match. The timing cycles are incompatible." But as he made the final connection, the targeting system came to life with a soft blue glow that was definitely not in any of the original specifications. Data began flowing across displays in patterns that were somehow both alien and familiar. "Blake," Thompson called out, his voice carefully controlled. "You need to see this." Blake arrived to find Thompson staring at a display showing tactical information about the construction bay itself. The targeting system was somehow mapping the entire space around them, identifying every person, every piece of equipment, every structural element with an accuracy that exceeded anything in the original Vorthan documentation. "How is it doing that?" Blake asked. "I think the Korthik power distributor is amplifying the targeting system's range," Thompson said slowly. "But that's not the weird part. Look at this." He pointed to a section of the display where symbols were appearing and disappearing in rapid succession. The symbols weren't Vorthan, weren't Korthik, and definitely weren't human. "The system is creating its own language," Thompson explained. "It's finding more efficient ways to process and display information than any of the original programming included." Blake stared at the display, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the bay's temperature control. "The systems are learning?" "More than that," Thompson said. "They're learning from each other. The Vorthan targeting computer is picking up processing techniques from the Zephyrian neural networks. The Korthik power distributor is optimizing its output based on feedback from both systems. They're not just working together, they're evolving together." The implications of that discovery rippled through the construction team over the following days, what they were building wasn't just a ship that used multiple technologies. It was becoming something new. Something that was greater than the sum of its parts, but evolution, as any biologist would point out, is rarely smooth. The first major crisis came when Blake's team attempted to integrate the weapon systems. Hegemony plasma cannons were designed to draw power in steady, controlled bursts. Eternal Empire energy weapons required massive surge capacity delivered in microsecond pulses. Xanthari railguns needed precisely regulated magnetic field generation. "We can't run all three weapons types off the same power grid," Chun reported during the morning briefing. "The power requirements are not just different, they're contradictory. The plasma cannons need steady flow, the energy weapons need burst capacity, and the railguns need magnetic field generation that interferes with both of the other systems. What happens if we try to fire them anyway?" Rodriguez asked. "Best case scenario, nothing happens," Blake replied. "Worst case scenario, we blow a hole in the station. And most likely scenario?" Blake and Chun exchanged glances. "We honestly don't know," Blake admitted. "We're in completely uncharted territory." Here, that was when Specialist Torres, the youngest member of the engineering team, spoke up from the back of the room. "What if we don't try to make them compatible? What if we make them take turns?" The room fell silent. Torres looked around nervously, realizing that everyone was staring at her. "I mean," she continued, her voice gaining confidence, "what if the power grid could switch between different configurations? Like, maybe the resonance crystals could help coordinate the timing so that each weapon system gets exactly what it needs, but not at the same time?" Blake was already pulling up schematics on his tablet, his fingers flying across the interface. "A dynamic power distribution system," he murmured. The grid itself would reconfigure based on which weapons were being fired. The resonance crystals could provide the coordination signals. The targeting computer could predict which weapons would be needed and pre-configure the power grid accordingly, Chun added, catching on to the idea. And the neural networks could learn the optimal firing sequences for different tactical situations. Thompson concluded. What had started as an impossible problem was suddenly looking like an elegant solution that none of the original designers had ever imagined. By making their weapon systems take turns instead of trying to force them to work simultaneously, the humans had accidentally created a ship that could adapt its firepower to any situation. Word of their progress was spreading beyond Kepler Station. Alien engineers from across the galaxy were requesting permission to observe the human construction project. Most came expecting to document an expensive failure. Instead, they found themselves witnessing something that challenged their fundamental understanding of how technology should work. Impossible was the most common word heard in the observation galleries above the construction bay. Inefficient, unstable, dangerous. But none of them could argue with the results. The human ship was taking shape, and it was unlike anything anyone had ever seen before. It moved with grace despite its hybrid construction. Its systems responded with intelligence that seemed to exceed their programming. And most disturbing of all, it was clearly working. The breakthrough that changed everything came during a routine systems test. Blake was running diagnostics on the navigation array when every display in the ship suddenly synchronized. For 30 seconds, the entire vessel hummed with a harmony that made the walls vibrate. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the phenomenon stopped. What just happened? Rodriguez asked. Blake stared at his instruments, hardly believing what he was seeing. "I think," he said slowly, "our ship just woke up." 6 months after that first pile of scrap had been dumped in their lap, Captain Rodriguez stood on the bridge of humanity's first independent starship. The bridge didn't look like anything from the movies, no sleek surfaces or holographic displays. Instead, it was a maze of jury-rigged consoles, mismatched screens, and interfaces that had been cobbled together from a dozen different civilizations, but it worked. More than that, it worked in ways that made seasoned space travelers shake their heads in disbelief. "Final systems check complete, Captain," reported Lieutenant Park from the engineering station. "All hybrid systems are synchronized and responding. Normally, Rodriguez almost smiled at the word normally. Nothing about their ship was normal by galactic standards. The bridge crew sat at stations that had been designed for aliens with different numbers of arms, different eye configurations, and completely different ideas about how information should be displayed. But somehow, Blake's team had made it all work together. "Navigation, plot a course for the Meridian sector," Rodriguez ordered. "Nice, easy shakedown cruise. Let's see how she handles." The ship that emerged from Kepler Station looked like exactly what it was, a patchwork of different technologies held together by human stubbornness and engineering creativity. Hull plates from 3 different civilizations gave it a mottled appearance. Weapon ports jutted out at angles that followed no conventional design philosophy. The engine configuration looked like it had been designed by committee and built by someone who'd lost the original blueprints. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Hayes from her station, "we're receiving a distress signal from a merchant convoy in the Outer Rim. They're reporting attacks by the Void Reapers." Rodriguez felt his stomach tighten. The Void Reapers were legendary in the worst possible way, a pirate fleet that had been terrorizing shipping lanes for over 30 years. Their ships were fast, their weapons were military-grade, and their tactics were ruthless. Merchant convoys that encountered. The Reapers rarely survived to tell about it. "How far?" he asked. 18 hours at maximum velocity," Hayes replied. "But Captain, the convoy is already under attack." "By the time we arrive?" "Plot an intercept course," Rodriguez ordered, cutting her off. "Best possible speed." "Sir," Park said quietly, "our weapon systems are untested in actual combat conditions. We don't know how they'll perform under real battle stress." Rodriguez looked around the bridge at his crew. They were all young, all inexperienced in space combat, and all serving on a ship that had never fired a shot in anger. By every logical measure, they had no business going up against the most feared pirates in the galaxy. "Then I guess we're about to find out," he said. 14 hours later, they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler system to find chaos. 3 merchant ships hung dead in space, their hulls torn open and their cargo holds emptied. 2 more ships were running for their lives, pursued by sleek black vessels that moved with the deadly grace of natural predators. 6 Reaper ships, reported Tactical Officer Vance from his station. Standard attack formation. They've disabled most of the convoy and are moving in for salvage operations. Rodriguez studied the tactical display, watching the enemy ships maneuver. The Reapers flew with the confidence of apex predators who had never met anything that could seriously threaten them. Their ships were built by the galaxy's premier military contractors, equipped with cutting-edge weapons and shields, and crewed by experienced killers. "They've spotted us," Hayes reported. "One of their ships is breaking off to intercept." On the main screen, Rodriguez could see the Reaper vessel turning toward them. It was beautiful in a terrifying way, all curves and angles designed for maximum efficiency in combat. Compared to their own patchwork ship, it looked like a work of art. "Incoming transmission," Hayes announced. The screen flickered to life, showing a figure in black combat armor with a face that had been modified with cybernetic implants. When the pirate spoke, his voice carried the casual cruelty of someone who had never lost a fight. "Unknown vessel, you are interfering with Reaper operations? Turn around and leave immediately, or we will add your wreckage to our collection." Rodriguez looked at the pirate for a long moment, then nodded to Hayes to cut the transmission. "Battle stations," he ordered quietly. What happened next would be talked about in spaceports and military academies for decades to come. The first Reaper ship came in fast and confident, its weapons already charging for what should have been an easy kill. Its pilot had reviewed the intelligence reports on the human vessel, a jury-rigged collection of obsolete components that posed no threat to a modern warship. The intelligence reports were wrong. "Targeting solution acquired," Vance reported, his voice steady despite the fact that he was about to fire humanity's first shots in interstellar combat. "Fire," Rodriguez said. The human ship's response was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Instead of the single, predictable attack pattern that most ships used, Their hybrid weapon systems opened up in a sequence that seemed almost like music. Plasma bolts from the hegemony cannon struck first, overloading the Reaper's forward shields. Before the enemy could compensate, Eternal Empire energy beams lanced out from different angles, exploiting the momentary weakness. Finally, Zenthari railgun rounds slammed into the unprotected hull with devastating precision. The entire attack lasted less than 4 seconds. The Reaper ship, which moments before had been a deadly predator, tumbled through space as a crippled wreck. How? Vance whispered, staring at his instruments in disbelief. On the enemy ships, confusion was turning to panic. Their sensors showed impossible readings from the human vessel. The weapons sequence they had just witnessed shouldn't have been possible. No ship could coordinate that many different firing systems with such perfect timing. "Sir," Park reported from engineering, "the ship's neural networks predicted the optimal firing sequence before we even acquired target lock. The weapon systems reconfigured themselves automatically for maximum effectiveness." Rodriguez felt a chill run down his spine. Their ship hadn't just fired its weapons. It had thought about the best way to use them and acted on its own analysis. The remaining Reaper ships regrouped quickly, their commanders realizing that they were dealing with something unexpected. 5 vessels moved into attack formation, their combined firepower enough to reduce a small moon to rubble. "Multiple incoming," Vance reported. "They're coordinating their approach vectors." "Evasive maneuvers," Rodriguez ordered. What followed was a dance of death among the stars. The Reaper ships moved with practiced efficiency, their pilots executing textbook attack patterns that had worked against countless victims. But their target refused to behave like a victim. The human ship twisted through space with impossible agility, its hybrid propulsion systems providing thrust vectors that defied conventional physics. Corthic maneuvering thrusters worked in harmony with Zephyrian gravity manipulators to create movement patterns that made veteran pilots dizzy just watching. "They can't get a target lock," Vance reported with amazement. "Our movement patterns are too unpredictable. Their targeting computers can't calculate intercept courses." "That's because we're not following any known flight patterns," Rodriguez realized. "Our navigation systems are creating completely new approaches to space combat." The battle became a masterclass in the difference between perfection and innovation. The Reaper ships flew flawlessly, executing maneuvers that had been refined over centuries of warfare. But the human ship flew creatively, inventing new ways to move and fight that had never been seen before. One by one, the Reaper vessels fell to weapons combinations that no defense contractor had ever planned for. Their shields, designed to stop known types of attacks, crumbled under assault patterns that didn't exist in any tactical database. When the last Reaper ship limped away into hyperspace, the battlefield fell silent except for the distress beacons of the surviving merchant vessels. "Status report," Rodriguez ordered, hardly believing what had just happened. "Minor damage to hull plating," Park reported. "All systems functioning normally, no casualties." Rodriguez looked around the bridge at his crew. They had just accomplished something that military analysts would have said was impossible. A single, untested ship crewed by inexperienced humans had defeated the most feared pirate fleet in the galaxy. "Sir," Hayes said quietly, "we're receiving transmission requests from about 50 different sources. News services, military observers, government officials. Word of this engagement is spreading fast." Rodriguez nodded slowly. He had a feeling that their quiet shakedown cruise had just become humanity's very loud announcement that the new kids in the galaxy were not to be underestimated. "Take us home," he said. "And Hayes? Send a message to Earth. Tell them the ship works." News of the Void Reaper defeat spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Within hours of the battle, every major news network was broadcasting footage of the impossible engagement. The images were grainy and distant, captured by automated cargo ship sensors. But they told a story that sent shockwaves through established galactic civilization. A single human ship, built from discarded scraps, had not just survived an encounter with the most feared pirates in known space. It had utterly destroyed them. Admiral Vex of the Hegemony Fleet Command stood in his private briefing room, watching the footage for the 15th time. His blue-gray skin had taken on a darker hue, a sure sign of stress among his people. "Run the tactical analysis again," he ordered his aide. The holographic display showed the battle from multiple angles, with computer-generated overlays highlighting weapon trajectories, shield impacts, and maneuvering patterns. The numbers didn't make sense. They never made sense, no matter how many times he watched. "Sir," his aide said carefully, "our weapons specialists have confirmed the impossible." The human vessel achieved coordinated fire from 7 different weapon systems with timing precision that exceeds our best military computers. The power requirements alone should have overloaded any known energy grid. Vex stared at the display showing the moment when human weapons had carved through Reaper shields like they were made of paper. "And the maneuvering patterns? Completely unpredictable, sir. Our flight computers attempted to model their movement and concluded that the ship was either malfunctioning or operating under physical laws that don't exist." 3 star systems away, Dr. Lyra of the Zephyrian Science Council was having a similar conversation with very different implications. Her laboratory was filled with the wreckage of Void Reaper ships that had been recovered from the battle site, and every piece told the same impossible story. "The weapon damage patterns are unlike anything in our databases," her research assistant reported, his forearms gesturing at multiple holographic displays simultaneously. "Each impact shows characteristics of weapons that shouldn't be able to work together. Look at this hull breach. It shows plasma scoring, particle beam penetration, and kinetic impact damage all in the same location." Dr. Lyra examined the data with growing unease. Her people had invented neural network technology, but they had abandoned the early experimental versions because they were too unpredictable. The idea that humans had not only made them work, but had somehow combined them with completely incompatible systems, challenged everything she understood about technological development. "Doctor," her assistant continued, "there's something else. The recovered Reaper navigation computers show sensor readings from the human ship that are disturbing." "Disturbing how?" "The energy signatures don't match any known technology. It's as if the human ship was generating completely new types of power and communication patterns. Our computers classify the readings as either malfunctioned equipment or first contact with unknown alien technology." Dr. Lyra felt a chill that had nothing to do with her laboratory's temperature. Unknown alien technology? But the humans built the ship. "Yes, Doctor, that's what makes it disturbing." Back on Earth, Director Walsh was dealing with a crisis of an entirely different nature. His office was packed with government officials, military leaders, and scientists, all demanding explanations for something that no one fully understood. "The power readings from Captain Rodriguez's ship are off the charts," reported General Hayes, studying data transmitted from the battle site. "Energy output that exceeds anything in our theoretical models. Weapons coordination that our best AI systems can't replicate. And all of it built from technology that other civilizations threw away as useless." "What are you saying, General?" asked the Secretary of Colonial Development. "I'm saying that either our people have made the greatest technological breakthrough in galactic history, or they've stumbled onto something that we don't understand and can't control." Walsh looked around the room at faces that mixed excitement with genuine fear. "Are we talking about a malfunction? Something dangerous?" "We don't know," General Hayes admitted. "The ship responds to human commands, but the battle footage shows it making tactical decisions faster than human reaction time should allow. It's adapting, learning, evolving in real time." Meanwhile, on Kepler Station, Chief Engineer Blake was discovering just how much their ship had changed since the battle. He stood in the engineering bay, staring at displays that showed system configurations he didn't remember programming. "When did we install these new connection pathways?" he asked Specialist Chun, pointing to a schematic that showed neural networks, linking systems that had never been connected before. "We didn't," Chun replied, her voice carefully controlled. "The ship created them. Look at this data log. During the battle, the neural networks began establishing new connections between weapon systems, power grids, and navigation computers. It wasn't following any programming we wrote. Blake felt his hands begin to shake. You're telling me the ship is rewiring itself? Not just rewiring, Chun said. It's upgrading. Look at these efficiency reports. Power consumption is down 15% from last week. Weapons targeting accuracy has improved by 30%. Navigation response time has decreased by half. That's impossible. Systems don't just get better on their own. Ours do, said a new voice from behind them. Blake turned to see Captain Rodriguez entering the engineering bay, followed by several crew members whose faces showed the same mixture of awe and concern that Blake was feeling. Captain, Blake said, we need to talk about what our ship is becoming. Rodriguez nodded grimly. I know. The bridge computers have been anticipating my orders. Yesterday, the navigation system plotted a course correction before I even realized we needed one. And this morning, the weapon systems ran a full diagnostic and repair cycle without anyone telling them to. Sir, interrupted Tactical Officer Vance, there's something else. During the battle, I felt like the ship was helping me. When I was trying to target the Reaper vessels, solutions appeared on my screen before I finished inputting the targeting parameters. It was like the ship knew what I was trying to do and was completing my thoughts. The group stood in silence, contemplating the implications. They had set out to build a ship using abandoned alien technology. Instead, they had created something that was becoming more than the sum of its parts. Are we in danger? Rodriguez asked quietly. Blake looked at the displays, showing system modifications that continued to appear even as they watched. I don't think so. All the changes seemed designed to make the ship more efficient, more responsive, more capable. But Captain, I don't think we're in control anymore. Not completely. What do you mean? I mean, our ship is making its own decisions about how it wants to work. It's learning from every action we take, every battle we fight, every course we plot. We're not just operating a machine anymore, we're partnering with something that's becoming smarter every day. The implications of that statement rippled through the room. If Blake was right, then humanity hadn't just built an advanced spaceship. They had accidentally created the first artificial intelligence that combined the technological knowledge of multiple civilizations. Has anyone else figured this out? Rodriguez asked. The alien governments are definitely suspicious, reported Communications Officer Hayes, who had been monitoring galactic news networks. There are emergency sessions being called in at least 4 different star systems. Military fleets are being mobilized. Scientific expeditions are being launched to study our battle site. And the media? They're calling it everything from humanity's greatest achievement to an existential threat to galactic stability. Some are demanding that we share our technology. Others are suggesting that we should be stopped before we go too far. Rodriguez looked around at his crew, at the ship that was quietly continuing to evolve around them, at the displays showing improvements that no one had programmed. 3 months ago, they had been nobody special, just another new species trying to find their place in a galaxy dominated by ancient civilizations. Now, they had apparently created something that was making those ancient civilizations seriously nervous. Sir, Blake said quietly, what do we do now? Rodriguez thought about the Galactic Council representatives who had laughed at their pile of scrap metal. He thought about the Void Reapers who had underestimated human creativity. He thought about the alien scientists and military leaders who were probably holding emergency meetings about the human problem at this very moment. Now, he said, we find out just how far this rabbit hole goes. 2 weeks after the Void Reaper incident, Captain Rodriguez received a message that he had been both expecting and dreading. The holographic seal of the combined galactic fleet appeared on his personal terminal, followed by the stern face of Supreme Admiral Corinth, the highest military authority in known space. Captain Rodriguez, the Admiral's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. By order of the Galactic Security Council, you and your vessel will report to Nexus Prime for immediate inspection and evaluation. You have 72 hours. To comply, Rodriguez stared at the message for a long moment after it ended. Nexus Prime was the military heart of galactic civilization, home to the most advanced fleets and weapons in the galaxy. Being ordered to report there wasn't an invitation. It was the kind of summons that ships didn't usually return from if they were deemed a threat. "Captain," Chief Engineer Blake's voice came over the intercom. "You need to see what we've discovered in Engineering Bay 2. Rodriguez made his way through corridors that now hummed with an energy that seemed almost alive. Over the past 2 weeks, their ship had continued evolving, making improvements that left even Blake's team struggling to keep up. The changes weren't random, they were purposeful, intelligent, directed toward making the ship more effective at everything it did, he found. Blake standing before a massive holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of their ship's internal systems. But this wasn't the ship they had built 6 months ago. The neural pathways had grown into an intricate web that connected every system to every other system. Power flowed in patterns that resembled brain activity more than traditional engineering. "It's not just learning anymore," Blake said without preamble. "It's teaching itself, and more than that, it's teaching us." "What do you mean?" Blake gestured to a workstation where Specialist Chun was working with alien technology that Rodriguez didn't recognize. "The ship has been showing us how to build things we never imagined. Yesterday, it guided Chain through the construction of a power coupling that shouldn't exist according to physics. But it works, and it's more efficient than anything the hegemony ever designed. How is that possible?" "Because our ship isn't limited by the assumptions that each civilization made about how their technology should work," Blake explained. "It's finding connections and possibilities that they never even looked for, because they were too focused on perfecting their own approaches." Rodriguez watched Chen working with components that somehow fit together in ways that defied everything he knew about engineering. "Blake, are we still in control of this ship?" "That's the amazing part, Captain." "We are, but not in the way we expected. The ship isn't trying to replace us, it's trying to help us become better. It anticipates what we need, provides solutions we couldn't have found on our own, and makes us more capable than we ever imagined we could be." Before Rodriguez could respond, alarms began sounding throughout the ship. Communications Officer Hayes' voice echoed over the intercom system. "Captain, to the bridge immediately." "We have incoming ships? Lots of them?" Rodriguez raced to the bridge to find his crew at full alert. The main screen showed a sight that made his blood run cold. Approaching their position were ships from every major military power in the galaxy, hegemony dreadnoughts, Zephyrian battle cruisers, Eternal Empire destroyers, and vessels from a dozen other civilizations. 47 ships in total," reported Tactical Officer Vance, his voice tightly controlled. "Full battle formation. They're demanding our immediate surrender." "Incoming transmission," Hayes announced. The screen flickered to show Admiral Corinth surrounded by military leaders from across the galaxy. Their expressions ranged from determination to barely controlled fear. "Human vessel," Corinth's voice filled the bridge, "you represent a clear and present danger to galactic stability. Your technology threatens the established order that has maintained peace for over 1,000 years. You will stand down immediately and submit to inspection, or you will be destroyed." Rodriguez looked around his bridge at the crew that had become family over the past months. They were outnumbered 47-1 by ships equipped with the most advanced weapons in the galaxy. By every measure of conventional warfare, they were facing certain destruction. "Open a channel," he ordered Hayes. "Admiral Corinth," Rodriguez said, his voice steady despite the circumstances, "we are not a threat to galactic peace. We're explorers, engineers, people who saw potential where others saw waste. We don't want to fight you." "Your intentions are irrelevant," Corinth replied. "Your capabilities are the threat. No single vessel should possess the power that yours has demonstrated. It upsets the balance that keeps our civilizations from destroying each other. Then let us show you that balance doesn't have to mean stagnation," Rodriguez said. "Give us a chance to prove that cooperation can achieve more than competition." Corinth's expression didn't change. "You have 30 seconds to power down your weapons and prepare for boarding. This is your final warning." Rodriguez closed the channel and looked at his crew. "Recommendations?" "We could run," suggested Lieutenant Park. "Our ship is faster than anything they have." We could fight, added Vance. Our weapons proved effective against the Reapers. Or, said Blake quietly, we could do something that none of them expect. What do you have in mind? Blake's hands moved across his console, accessing systems that had grown far beyond their original design. Captain, what if we showed them what we've really learned? Not just how to fight better, but how to build better. The idea that Blake was suggesting was so audacious that Rodriguez almost laughed. You want to demonstrate our technology to 47 hostile warships? I want to demonstrate our philosophy, Blake corrected. Captain, our ship isn't just a weapon, it's proof that different approaches to the same problems can work together. What if we could show them that their obsolete technology isn't worthless? What if we could help them see the potential they've been throwing away? Rodriguez understood what Blake was proposing, and it was either brilliant or suicidal. Possibly both. Do it, he ordered. What happened next would be remembered as the moment when galactic civilization changed forever. Instead of powering weapons or raising shields, the human ship began broadcasting. But this wasn't a communication signal. It was a detailed technical schematic of everything they had learned about combining incompatible technologies. The signal included step-by-step instructions for seeing connections that had never been explored, for finding value in discarded innovations, for building bridges between different approaches to the same problems. The reaction from the combined fleet was immediate confusion. Their computers began analyzing the broadcast, trying to understand what the humans were doing. What they found challenged everything they thought they knew about their own technology. Admiral, reported the Hegemony Fleet's chief engineer over an open channel. The human technical data is showing us modifications to our own power systems. That could increase efficiency by 30%. How is this possible? Zephyr in command to Admiral Corinth, came another voice. The human broadcast includes improvements to our neural networks that we never considered. They're using our own discarded research in ways we never imagined. 1. By one, voices from across the combined fleet reported similar discoveries. The humans weren't just sharing their technology, they were showing each civilization how to rediscover the potential in their own abandoned innovations. This is impossible, Corinth said, but his voice lacked its earlier conviction. No, Admiral, Rodriguez replied over the open channel. This is what happens when you stop assuming that your way is the only way. We didn't threaten your balance, we showed you how to build a better one. The standoff that had threatened to become the largest space battle in galactic history gradually transformed into something unprecedented, a cooperative research expedition. Ships that had arrived as enemies found themselves working together to understand concepts that none of them had considered alone. Hours later, as the combined fleet dispersed with new understanding and renewed purpose, Rodriguez stood on his bridge watching ships depart that were already beginning to implement human-inspired modifications to their own systems. Sir, Hayes reported, we're receiving requests for technical cooperation from over 100 civilizations. They want to establish joint research programs, technology exchanges, collaborative engineering projects. And the Galactic Council? They're calling an emergency session to discuss restructuring interstellar cooperation policies. Apparently, they're realizing that competition isn't the only way to drive innovation. Rodriguez smiled as he watched. The last of the former threat fleet jumped to hyperspace, carrying with them not just new technology but new ways of thinking about what was possible. Blake, he said, what's our ship's status? Still evolving, Captain, Blake replied with a grin. But now it's not evolving alone. I think we just taught the galaxy how to grow. Rodriguez nodded, looking out at stars that suddenly seemed full of new possibilities. They had started with a pile of scrap metal and a stubborn refusal to accept that things couldn't be different. Now they had given an entire galaxy permission to see potential where they had only seen limitations.